maybe while we wait for this, Stella, if you can introduce yourself and then pass it on to Elias.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Stella Porto from the Inter-American Development Bank in Washington, D.C.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Elias Ruez. I'm from Common Sense e-learning and training consultants based in Vienna.
Shall I try my microphone?
No, you're live. That's great.
Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, then I should just briefly at least say who I am, Dominic Orr. Unfortunately, I couldn't be with you this year. I'm from GIZ, the German Development Agency, and one of the managers of the global learning platform, ePIC. Back to Don or back to Stella?
Great. Okay, so we have two mics going now. So basically this is a redo of something that was done in Costa Rica and San Juan with everybody in the room. So, right, exactly. The slight change of people, and also they were sort of co-facilitating. In this case, I'm going to take the facilitator role as soon as Serge sets it up so that I can see my lines. So basically, we've introduced ourselves. You know who I am already from earlier. And Elias and Stella and Dominic have introduced themselves. So basically, it's talking about international development. So development across borders in areas. So the Inter-American Development Bank does a lot of infrastructure type projects, etc. Common Sense has worked with ITC ILO and can speak somewhat to that. That's the International Training Center for the International Labor Organization. And then Dominic with GIZ. GIZ is connected to the German International Development Ministry, and it's an INGO that works with that. And then Dominic works with a very large project called ePIC with that, and also Smart Africa. So I have three questions here, and the first question, we'll just sort of maybe start with Stella. And what are the dreams of open recognition? What does open recognition mean for IDB, the Inter-American Development Bank?
So I think making a segue from Serge, we didn't start with recognition, we started with badges. And so I would say that when we started that in 2017-18, the idea was that we had a large offering of learning and other knowledge products in the region that we serve, Latin America and the Caribbean. And there was, because we're not a university, there was very little recognition or something that would state what people had done. So we started the project thinking of two basic things. One, that we wanted to influence the region to open up the way we recognize learning. In order to do that, we needed to become issuers. So the first step was to implement something that we were issuers, and through that issuing, we could influence partners in the region. And I think in recent years, and I think I'll get to that later, the opening up of the concept of badging towards open recognition has been slowly taking place. And I would say that the element here is related to understanding your context and understanding that you can't just jump from one thing to the other, and that has to be an evolving concept.
Okay, great. So Dominic, you're on next. What would be the sort of dreams of open recognition for you, especially coming out of, I think you were at Online Educa as well, and reflecting on that?
Yeah, so maybe I should just say something a bit about kind of the genesis of ePIC. I mean, it's similar in a way, or my setting is similar to Stella's in the way that we as a German development agency, we've got projects right across the world. Maybe the interesting thing though is we're not essentially an educational agency, and Atingi was never first and foremost an educational initiative. Really, it's more the other way around. We would be given the goal from our ministry to find ways to reduce hunger and poverty and to ensure a justice-driven digital and social transformation for all. So that's kind of interesting because it means that we can take a slightly different stance on education than maybe an educational institution would. So we start with the point that formal education isn't enough. It stops too early and it leaves skills and knowledge gaps. And that where for us, this whole piece of open recognition comes in. So really, we're trying to think of how can we fit learning and enabling new opportunities into people's lives and into their own circumstances, their own social circumstances. So that's what we're trying to do. So I think in the end, we would like to end in this kind of positive top right-hand quadrant where we are kind of community and future facing. We certainly try to design with the user as kind of our main focus point. But I think we'll come into the next point of why that's actually hard to do. But that's why, for us, thinking about open recognition actually would be a natural thing to do. But it doesn't feel natural, and we'll get to that in a minute.
Just wondering, before we pass on to Elias, if you can make the distinction between the audiences that you're dealing with. So IDB, the professional versus end user audience, maybe Stella.
Yes, so the Inter-American Bank, like other development banks, we serve mostly the public sector, although there is an audience in the private sector. And mostly these are professionals. So we're none of our learning is directed to people that don't have any degrees or that need to get to their high school diploma. The focus is really advancing, reskilling, upskilling professionals that serve in the public sector. So I would say that the IDB, we have IDB Invest, which is the private sector, and IDB Lab that does other things, but IDB would be the public sector.
So, and Dominic, in contrast, you're mostly focused on end users, citizens in home countries, correct?
Certainly that has been kind of the focus over the past years while we've been scaling, yeah. So just one thing, we would probably see that our user group would probably in the age of 18 to 23. So that would be true, yes.
Right. Okay. So, sorry, Elias, over to you.
Yeah, maybe I can add to that, a little bit about our user group that we deal with. So as an independent consultancy, so to say, we work, I think, pretty much with both kind of target audiences, with professionals, but also with people with very low professional education. We've also worked quite extensively, I think, with the Atingi platform as well. So in terms of our dreams in that regard, so I'd say roughly around 90% of the projects that we implement are in the context of international cooperation projects. We do have a couple of private entities as well, but most of it is international cooperation projects. Especially in the Pan-African region. And so, like this cross-endorsement aspect of open recognition, endorsement across borders and so on and so forth, that was or has been a really big issue for us in past projects. Like, let's say, on the African continent, of course, from country to country, but also since we're working together with lots of experts, local experts in different African regions as well, it was also kind of a question of how can we bring competent personnel to different places in the world. So how can we bring African professionals, for example, to Europe? how can they get their skills recognized over here, and so it's kind of across borders, but also cross endorsement between other systems that exist. So not only between countries, but also between organizations and stuff like that. So that's one of the major dreams, I guess, that we don't have too much influence as consultancy firms. So that's more on your part, and the part of big international organizations. But of course, we support and try to come up with strategies. The area that is more closely related to what we are actually doing probably is the one of micro-learning and individual skills recognition rather than entire program certificates and stuff like that.
Often in non-formal situations?
Exactly. We also have a presentation on on a project that we're doing for the TUI Care Foundation, for example, tomorrow. But also the ITC ILO project that we've done together with Down and Learning Agents. It's about developing a framework for recognition on a skills level, whether it be theoretical content, learning content, practical skills, whatever, bringing these things together. And bringing that into a kind of a visual language and all that stuff. So it's kind of moving away from this traditional form of big program certifications that are based on formal recognition.
Okay, so let's move on to the hard stuff. What have been some of the barriers and challenges? And maybe I'll put that question to Stella.
So I think I would start with communication and communication to the different stakeholders. We're working with the context of low trust. So although it is very interesting to think of recognition as I am exploring, I am learning in these environments, those who are receiving badges are looking for things that will help them advance in their careers. So you need to consider that, and even moving the concept from certification, which is the word that is loved by my audience, to something that is open recognition. It is an evolving concept, right? And to do that, you have to really understand that these people work within a system, and that system will not just change and accept whatever new concept you bring in about open recognition, right? So I think there we actually are working in developing strategies, two different levels of strategy. One that is internal, so communicating within IDB. And in that sense, that internal communication is really, I liked something that Serge said, which is it's not us and them. So in the beginning, usually the people that are creating the badges, so who are these people? They are from the different sectors of the bank. So I might be people that are working in the water sector, or people working just with climate change, and they want to recognize either courses or other kinds of recognition that I can give some examples later. But talking to these people that it is not about you creating a badge for these other people, but you're a part of that network. That is also a challenge in communication. And to do that, you need to make these badges have some meaning within the organization, because if they are not important within the organization, how can you really portray that they are supposed to be important outside of the organization? That involves talking to the creators, talking to the IDB employees that are also being recognized and need to value that, and also, even more challenging, the HR. So having conversations, they do videos saying it's very important, but then they have to develop systems that really do what they're talking about. Like, walking the talk is actually what I say all the time. Like, walk the talk. Not just the talking. So that's the internal strategy. Then the external strategy is there's a lot of education to be done within a context of very rigid systems of recognition that comes from governments and organizations that even when you give something digital, they'll say, I need a paper to really believe that this digital thing has some meaning. And you need to respect that, right? You really need to respect that in order to push the boundaries. So developing strategies to those earners and also the organizations that need to recognize, so the consumers of these badges. And also I think where we have been doing, have been more successful is really to partner with people. And partnering in what way? Showing them, oh, here's telling a story, here's what I've done, and I think you can benefit from that too, and we can help you not only with advising, sometimes just sharing the experience, but also in the real way. Like, yeah, I will share my platform with you, and you don't have to invest all this money in infrastructure, and we'll do this for you. And then if you grow, yeah, you can go on and, fly your own, go in your own trip. But here it is something that you can start with. So I think the challenge is really about this communication that what I find most difficult, it's that it's not a one-time communication. It has to be sort of this really long-term, many kinds of communication, and it requires skills that sometimes we're doing the badge part, that's not our talent. So we really need a lot of other people to come in and devise these different ways of speaking and getting the organization to walk the talk,
That's great. But maybe just a little tip or trick, because you were saying something just the other day, I thought that was kind of cool. And you were talking about walking the talk, but you're also talking about all I need is one person to do something, okay? And be able to show it to others. Basically.
Yes, actually my presentation tomorrow, I'm inviting everyone. It is storytelling, right? So this was supposed to be my answer to the other question, but I will anticipate.
Okay.
But it is, if I get one person within the bank that they are convinced, oh, here's a different way of recognizing, and this is cool, this is about application of knowledge, or something that is outside the transactional course badge kind of thing, I really have been benefited by having just a champion, because that person will really showcase to others. And within a political organization like mine, it becomes even a competition, right? Oh, this sector is doing this, so I want to do it too. And creating that, that this is something that is valued by the region. So the stories are really at the center of moving forward.
Okay. Dominic, over to you. Challenges.
So, yeah, thanks. So, of course, much of the challenges are similar to the ones that Stella has mentioned. I mean, the main point for us is we are a global platform with the goal and with the mandate to mainstream learning and exchange opportunities. And in a way, we are also a service provider, because in the end, we don't develop the courses we have on our platform. We can try and, curate them a little bit. We can provide advice, etc. But in the end, we are dependent also on the ideas of those people who are wanting to offer these learning opportunities on the platform. So from our standpoint, we would be arguing for flipping the focus. It's not about the courses and quizzes. It's about what you can do with the knowledge and experience. And this, again, as I've mentioned, it should be in our DNA as German Development Corporation, because of course we should always be focusing on this. But what I would say is that people who design courses or also think about courses or think about learning, they actually don't think about certification very much, and they think even less about recognition. I like to call this the formal education trap. So most people who are doing this kind of thing, especially if they're not the learning experts, but they just realize they need a learning component to achieve their overall goal, when they think about the learning piece, they're always thinking about their own kind of mental idea of what education is like. So when they think about what does the learner have to come out with, it's most of the time their kind of default answer to that would be, it's a simple certificate. And it's because they're just mixing up the idea of what happens when you do normally when you finish a bachelor degree or a master's degree, and they think, well, that was good. Why can't we have that for non-formal education as well? So we're always arguing that certification and recognition, it can't be the end of a course of learning. It's always the start of the new pathways. But we kind of, as Stella was saying, it's always this thing of how do we get this across well? And maybe the last point from my side, so in the constellation of our team, so we're about 30 people in the team, and we are 3 managers. My formal role is I'm the product owner. So I like to always give metaphors around the kitchen, because one of my first jobs when I got to Germany was to work as a chef for 1.5 years. So basically I would say I'm stuck in the kitchen. I'm not always front of house. So part of this is, while I would like to be designing these things and having these things out there and offering them on our mainstream platform, there's many other dynamics that are happening around which are kind of making this very difficult to realize. And I think the interesting thing for us as a Tingy is we have to really focus on this mainstreaming aspect and being pragmatic and being realistic. So the whole time we're trying to think about how can we embed all of these ideas into things that seem very natural and kind of just part of a routine process to those people we're working with. And I would say all of that is what makes it very hard to achieve what we would like to achieve, and what actually, as I say, should come very natural to us.
Great, thanks, Dominic. Elias, any insights about the challenges?
I think much has already been said. I think there's many similarities. I believe it's just mostly, a question of the mindset, and it's really hard to kind of turn people around that there is more to recognition and also to education than just providing a final certificate for a course program. And that's especially true if you want to implement informal recognition, like we've also noticed in our project together at ITC ILO. There was much skepticism at the beginning about informal recognition in the form of certain badges and so on and so forth. And I believe with badges in particular, because they have this gamified origins, and they're often associated with playful things, with customer retention programs, with sports apps like Runtastic and stuff like that. So they're not really perceived as serious accreditation of learning to a certain degree. So, and it's also, I mean, it's not only a lost opportunity in terms of recognition in general, but I believe if you look at the scientific literature, specifically for gamification, for example, it shows that the motivational aspects, the positive motivational aspects that gamification initiatives can provide are actually then most present when you perceive a real life benefit versus some digital goodie. And that's exactly what we're doing here. So as kind of, let's say, at Common Sense, we're a little bit of learning hippies, maybe, in terms of promoting lifelong learning. There's a huge opportunity for gamified approaches that at the same time also provide recognition, and it's really hard to communicate this and to to change these mindsets. And I believe one other aspect also that kind of contradicts at the moment right now our vision of a learner-centered recognition system and lifelong learning and so on and so forth is the fact that the types of badges or certificates or any other form of recognition that I receive currently as a learner, it's usually scattered because there are so many different providers in the game, and I basically, for me, it's very, very difficult if I go to one institution and receive training there, then I get a badge from, I don't know, a Credible or the Open Badge Factory and stuff like that, and then I move to a different system, and it's so those don't really those don't transfer, and I think that's a bit of an issue. So, in our opinion, it should be easier for the learner in the future to have some sort of an independent wallet for accreditation, where all the different providers that are out there can then export or link their recognition formats to
More of an ecosystem.
Exactly, and kind of a platform independent, very learner-centered idea, I think.
So, what about the good news?
So, well, I mentioned the storytelling, which I think is has worked well. But to get to that, I would think that the way we organized it internally has helped. And the way we did was creators, because we have a large organization with very different interests. So creating the badge is very distributed. So people that don't even work with each other, there are very few standards in terms of creating. I basically, anybody that says, can I have a badge for this? I don't care about the this. I say, it's fine, anything. It's just the quality of how to recognize the this that they decide to do. So we focused on that, and the work that we did together, the framework and the taxonomy helped us to, now when we talk to these potential creators within IDB, we can say, oh, you have an event. Okay, you want to recognize those who participate in the event? Here it is. And then the here it is, it's not just saying that we can give a badge for an event. We already say, okay, if it is an event, we need this kind of information because this needs to be clear, it needs to be complete, and we explain all that. So we have done a lot of, I could call this like streamlining, but streamlining with the understanding that the people who I work with, they don't need to understand all the back end of badge. They don't need to understand any of that. This is our work. And so we do a lot of service with them. We're getting to the point now that I say, just tell me what you want to do, and I will give you a draft of the badge all written, and you can change. So like reducing this to make it really, really easy. The more we do that, the more adopters we have, and also to work in devising then strategies. I'll give you an example. This person has an event every year. So we will work with them to show you don't need to create a different badge every year, because if you have a different badge every year and then you want to look at everybody that has participated in all the events through every year, you're scattering them around with different badges. Hey, here's something that we can do. You can have an addendum that is added when you issue the badge, and so you have all of this community, everybody. So all of that, I think, needs to be done, that you don't need to explain the whole back end. You just, this is what I can give you, and you make it really, really easy. So that part of the implementation, I think, has worked. So the creation is very free, but configuration and uploading and all the technical background, that's very centralized. We even have a ticket system. After they have had like this talking tour with us, and they know, then the next time, they can just download the template, fill out the template, say they want to do, they submit a ticket, we can control everything that we're doing technically. But that is the door to actually have the badge is centralized, because that is where we can guarantee the quality, right? If we had this done whomever, then you would have badges that would not be consistent. So for example, working with partners, oh, can I put so-and-so logo? Or, you know, we have to explain, this image is very small. You can't put like 6 logos in here, you know, because they're very focused on the image. But then explain what endorsement is, the process to get that, and doing that in an easy way. So with that done, then I think the stories start happening. And each little story that adds something new, that is not about an event or a course, it's now recognizing the application of some knowledge in a very evident space, that becomes a new story, and it's an example that I can use with other people within the organization.
That's great. So an explicit framework to make the paradigm visible, and then performance support tools that take away all the technology. Great. Okay, great. Dominic, over to you.
Yeah, really kind of following up on what Stella said and reiterating what I said to Doug recently, which is that these things, I think, only become successful if they're super boring. So this is kind of what we're trying to do. We're trying to make using our open badges easy, and they should feel like a natural solution to our partners. So the one super quick example I'd like to give is from the tourism industry. And the interesting thing is just the whole kind of narrative of how this came about. So there's during the COVID period, many people lost jobs in tourism as the tourism branch declined due to, of course, people not being able to travel, which meant then a lot of people lost their jobs across the world. Now, in the tourism industry, many people have got jobs based on connections, based on the job attained skills, but they don't really have certification or a good documentation of what they've achieved. So one of the economic sectors in GIZ, which was focused on tourism, came to us and said they would like to offer a learning program. And we said, okay, well, what you really need is to make sure that those people are being recognized partly for what they have achieved already. And then you need to also, as Elias was saying, you need to offer some small kind of learning opportunities as well, which help get them kind of back on track. And what we know is in tourism, 2 big things have changed over the past couple of years. The one is there's more digitalization in the whole process, and the other is a big focus on sustainability and ecotourism. So we try to kind of make these into new learning programs. We've got about halfway there. So we're issuing the open badges for the learning parts. And the next stage, and we hope we still get there, is to actually extend that to practical experience that people have either with their new employer or kind of when they try out with employers, so that they've actually got practical experience, which can also be documented as well. But the whole point of all of this was it just seemed very natural within the context of diagnosing what kind of solution we need to a problem. And I think that is the way to do it. And the e-tourism or the e-academy that we've built on Atingi is in fact one of the most successful kind of areas of our courses we have on the platform. And I think it's just because it's really been thought through from end to end instead of being thought of as just a series of courses.
Okay, Elias.
I think the tourism, especially the e-academy, is actually a good keyword for me. We've been working together with GIZ on that project. And tourism is also kind of the branch that we are promoting here at ePIC, also with our presentation on Thursday. So stay tuned. And it's actually so. what works well for us is, of course, the whole technical shenanigans. They are there, they're in place, they work. The recognitions work well, the platforms work well together with the learning management systems and so on and so forth. And if you take away a little bit of the complexity, it also works very well with the clients so far. And in particular, what I'm very proud of, I'd say, with the E-Academy, but also with the project for the TOI Care Foundation that we are presenting on Thursday, is kind of the visual language that we have come up with for the badging system. So just imagine that TOI Care Foundation project is still on the way, so there's a lot to be done, but the idea in general is to have both recognition for theoretical and practical content, to have this kind of skills and competence-based modularity that we're aiming for, so stacking of skills, but also enabling learner pathways. So depending on my personal preferences, I can then choose bits and pieces and accumulate them together to bigger programs or competencies in that way. And that works so great with our vision, so to say, of lifelong learning and the whole promotional aspects of that, and also in the future, hopefully to more easily provide information about the actual skills that I have acquired as a learner to a potential employer, but also to identify my skill gaps very much very specifically and very much in particular to figure out, I don't need an entire training program on X, Y, Z, but rather very specific and targeted training that I could take on certain gaps that I have, and then I'm qualified for an entirely new job. And that's a very, very cool thing, I think. And once we combine that with the whole international cross-border, cross-organization endorsement aspect, that's a really nice vision for the future. And I think that there are already some very great examples in place, so kind of the start of the process, more or less. For example, in New Zealand, they have a program, or rather a framework for recognition that is based on a national qualifications framework in that country. And that is a great thing, because as we established before, kind of credibility, especially with regards to badges, is very often an issue, but if it's part of the national qualifications framework, that's taken care of. So that's out of the question. And then you already have this kind of cross-endorsement between different issuers and organizations. Still on a national level, it would be nice to have this on an international scale, but there are already systems in place that are very well on the way with regards to what we are envisioning for the whole thing.
Okay, thank you. And endorsement, that's a nice throw to a clinic that's going to be happening a little later in the conference. So I think we've come to the end. We've gone a little bit over. I think we have time for maybe one question if somebody has. Oh, Ashley, in the back there. Just a sec. Sorry.
I hope my question's the worthy question. From the lens or perspective of marginalized communities, where we're trying to acknowledge inherent knowledge or knowledge that existed long before institutions or establishments of like Western structures, how, have you guys supported, or how are you acknowledging inherent or traditional knowledge that exists without recognition, where we don't need recognition? But it has to happen to sort of blend into Western or sort of institutional standards for the purpose of blending two-eyed seeing. Have you guys come across that, where you have a community that says we have a traditional healer, we have a birth worker, we acknowledge that, we're not going to set they don't have to go through a course, we acknowledge it, that's enough. Have you come across that where you've given open recognition or badges to that for the purpose of just having it recognized by sort of institutions?
So my example is not really IDB doing that, but IDB helping a partner do that. So UNED, which is the National Distance Education University in Costa Rica, they actually have a whole, it's called PROCAI, so they have a whole area that works with indigenous populations, in this case, women. There's a small group. And so what we did here is they, through our relationship with them, they are using our infrastructure and what we can help them in developing badges to recognize abilities and skills of these women. We just started this project. The interesting challenge there is that first, for example, the badges require people to have an email. A lot of these women didn't have email. So I'm going to repeat here what I have said to Eric every single time I see him. Give me badges delivered through WhatsApp with your phone number. That's all I want. This solves the entire continent. So that was a challenge. The work that we did with these women, which is beautiful actually, is we had a meeting with them, virtual meeting with them, so the people from UNED brought them to this virtual meeting. And the first thing we did was to have a training about badges. So their first badge was a selfie badge that they developed during the training, just to understand what that was. And that process of looking at themselves and saying, this is an ability that I have and should be recognized, was already very, very powerful for them. So what we're looking forward with this project is taking all the activities that this PROCAI does with them. This group is called Mujeres Tejiéndonos because the weaving is one of their abilities. They will define what badges they want to develop through us. So we're just a venue for them. So that's the work we've been doing, because this is not like the audience of our own learning. But I think this is a very important example for me to show other people within IDB that we can partner with these people, especially smaller groups, because it doesn't make any sense for these groups to invest in a whole system.
I'm really glad you're able to bring in that women weaving. That's excellent. Okay, I think we've run out of time, so thank you very much to the panelists. Dominic, thanks for coming in from Germany.